Hello everyone, Brandon Weaver here, and welcome to this week's Desha Youth Weekly Devotional. Now, starting this week, because it is February and Valentine's Day falls in the month of February, we're going to be starting a new series that, if you guessed it from the opening title, it is called The Bachelors of the Bible. So, guess what we're going to be looking at? Yep, love, dating, relationships. This is going to be an interesting series for all of us. It's going to be interesting for me to teach this to you. It's going to be hopefully something that you guys are going to be able to learn from. We're going to look into God's Word at some of the different relationships that are in there. Because there are some really good relationships to look at in the Bible, and there are some dumpster fires. And with both, I think we can learn a lot of what to do and a lot of what not to do. And somewhere along the line, I'll kick in some embarrassing stories from me, because, I mean, let's face it, that's what I'm here for, right? So, let's get to it. But as we get started today, I thought I would share with you guys something that I wrote many years ago. This is a piece of paper that front and almost back is completely full. But this was something that I filled out back whenever I was probably around 9th grade, I believe, somewhere in that ballpark, 8th, 9th grade. But I was at a church camp at Bud Creek. For that week, they were focusing in on dating and relationships and the importance of being with the right person and all of these kinds of things. And so one of the things that this guy actually taught us and said was, you need to sit down and you need to write out what you're looking for in a spouse. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is something to, kind of really stop and think, okay, what is most important? Now, here's the thing. There is a little bit of a danger to that when you're a teenager, because when you're a teenager, we have this tendency of thinking that my preferences are actually God's best for our life. One of the things, the very first thing, I think got the first one right. So the very first most important thing that I wrote down was, she has to be a true Christian, because lightness and darkness can't be mixed. You got to be careful in who you date and why you date them. But for me, that very first conviction was, I'm going to date a girl that is a Christian, a real Christian, that she put her faith first. I would prefer that she at least likes sports. Now, let's be honest, is that really something that matters to God? Now, deep down, whether or not she would like sports or not, it's probably not real high on that list. Not nearly as important as whether or not she's a Christian. So probably could have left that one off. She needs to have a good personality. This means she's not too loud and not too quiet. Does that really, that's more personal preference, right? But the thing is, when you are a teenager, these are the kind of things that you think about. Those are the things that are most important to you, because you're kind of immature, right? Which kind of brings me to Samson. So, as I said, from that list and from the countless camps and conventions and different things that I went to growing up, I always heard this one phrase kind of repeated over and over and over again. And I use it because, I mean, it's the preacher slash youth director thing to say and do. And that is, are you looking for God's best in your life? And it doesn't necessarily have to just mean dating relationships. It can mean for the kind of work that you're in. It can mean for what you're looking for as far as the school that you go to, as far as college, what you train, what you grow up to be. They're all different things that this kind of generalized phrase can mean. Looking for God's best for your life. And the thing is, for a lot of people, it's hard to know what God's best is because they never take the time to get in God's Word and study it. And they never take the time to really spend time with God in prayer and listen to the Holy Spirit to guide them on just what exactly it is that God has got for them. So Samson's mom is being spoken to by the angel of the Lord here in chapter 13, verses 4 and 5, and it says this: "Now please be careful not to drink wine or beer or to eat anything unclean, for indeed you will conceive and give birth to a son. You must never cut his hair, because the boy will be a Nazarite to God from birth, and he will begin to save Israel from the power of the Philistines." So for Samson, when he was born, he was going to be born under this Nazarite vow. And with this Nazarite vow, there were certain restrictions that he was going to have to live by. He wasn't going to be allowed to eat and drink certain things. He was going to have to keep his hair long, which is what most people know Samson from. And so he was going to have to live his life in a specific way. And he was supposed to do that from birth. And from birth, he was supposed to be trained up in how to become a mature follower of God. But we see in chapter 14, it's not exactly what happened. Samson went down to Timnah and saw a young Philistine woman there. He went back and told his father and mother, "I have seen a young Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife." But his father and mother said to him, "Can't you find a young woman among your relatives or among any of our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines for a wife?" But Samson told his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." So here in these verses, we see a young, immature Samson coming to his parents saying, "I have met the girl of my dreams." And because of the kind of social situation that they were living in that day and time, it wasn't a matter of dating like we know it. It was a matter of the father going to the other father and then setting up basically a business deal that, my son will marry your daughter for X amount of sheep, X amount of cattle, X amount of money, however they wanted to work it out, they would come up with some sort of price and negotiations. Real romantic, right? "I've found my dream girl, now go get her for me." And his parents say, "Samson, are you sure? Really? This is the woman that you want to marry?" Because here's the thing. The Philistines they were basically an enemy of Israel. They had pretty much enslaved the people. They had treated them just terribly. And so Samson's family was like, "I cannot believe that my son would actually marry that woman from those people." And as they're on their way, we get to the famous story of Samson having a lion come upon him, and he's able to to kill the lion because the Spirit of God come upon him. He was able to kill him with his bare hands. And to get everything set for the wedding, he sees this dead lion carcass. It's the same dead lion carcass that was left after he killed the lion. But he noticed something. He noticed there were bees swarming out of it. And so Samson goes and he looks and he sees honey inside of this dead lion. And as disgusting as this sounds, Samson reaches into the dead lion, pulls out some honey and eats it. And as disgusting as that sounds, that's not really even the worst part of it. You see, as part of that Nazirite vow, Samson was not supposed to touch anything that was dead. At the wedding, everything kind of goes well. There's this big party. There are 30 guests that are provided for Samson. The Philistine family just says, hey, Samson, here's 30 people for you to party with. Kind of odd, but okay. So as the day kind of progresses, Samson looks at these Philistine guys and he says, hey guys, I got a riddle for you. Chapter 14 and verse 14, we see Samson's riddle to these guys. It says, so he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. And so he has give them this riddle, and he has said, look, if you guys, just one of you, can come up with the right answer, then I'm going to give every one of you guys a new set of clothes. But if none of you come up with the right answer, then every one of you owes me a new set of clothes. Well, the joyful exuberance of the wedding slowly starts to dissipate because nobody's got a clue as to what Samson's talking about. On day 4, we see these 30 guys come up to Samson's bride and say, look, you and your father, y'all invited us here to rob us because there is no way any of us are going to be able to get this stupid riddle. Now, she could have said, y'all didn't have to take the stupid bet, but she didn't. And these guys do what a mob does. They threaten her. They say, look, you some way, somehow get that answer from Samson. At this point, Samson's bride and Samson show how incredibly immature they both are and how unprepared for marriage they really were. Because Samson's young bride comes to him and says, you've got to tell me what the answer is to this riddle because I'm your wife. Because I'm your wife, you should just tell me everything, because if you don't tell me everything, you don't really love me. She throws that emotional blackmail at Samson. And Samson's like, well, wait a minute. I do love you, but I haven't even told my parents what the answer is to this riddle. I would tell them before I would tell you. Maybe she would have trusted Samson enough to told him, hey, there's a mob that's going to come for all of us if you don't tell us what this answer is. You know, I've always kind of wondered why she didn't tell Samson. Because you want to talk about holding something over somebody, you know, he doesn't trust you enough to tell you what the riddle is. You don't trust him enough to tell him that there's a mob that wants you dead and your father dead if he doesn't come up and tell you what the answer is. The last day of the wedding celebration, she has wore Samson out, and he finally goes, okay, this is what it means. The Bible literally says that she nagged him until he finally gave it up. Philistines come to Samson and they say, "Ah, Samson, we know the answer to your riddle." And Samson looks at him and goes, "Really? Ah, yes, we do." And so they say, "What is stronger than a lion? And what is sweeter than honey?" And Samson knew, and Samson got mad. You wouldn't have got this answer right if you hadn't plowed with my heifer. Meaning, if you hadn't have messed with my wife, then you wouldn't have got this right. And so Samson, not controlling his emotions, goes down into the city and he kills 30 Philistines. The wedding turns into the dumpster fire of all dumpster fires as Samson brings the clothes back, throws it at the guys, storms off. Well, the guys are there. The father of the bride looks at one of them, thinks, well, Samson's not going to finish the actual marriage ceremony, so congratulations, Skippy, you get my daughter. This happens. The guy marries the Philistine woman who was to be Samson's wife. Well, Samson goes back home and he stays with his mom and dad for a few days. And Samson finally says, okay, I'm gonna go back and see my wife. Samson goes back to see the Philistines, the Philistine woman and her father meets Samson at the door. And Samson says, I'm here to see my wife. And the guy looks at him like, uh-oh, I have messed up. And so Samson finds out that his wife has been given away to another man. That did not sit well with Samson, as it would not have sat well with any of us if we found out that our wife had been given to somebody else, our fiance, the woman that we love, our first love, was going to be given or had been given to someone else. And Samson flies off the handle. He again loses control of his emotions. And because he has lost control of his emotions, he goes into the Philistine countryside, and he gathers 300 foxes. And he takes those 300 foxes and he gets 150 torches, and he ties the tails of these foxes together with a torch in between. He lights the torch and he sets those foxes through the crops of the Philistines. Understand, this is right toward the end of the growing season, and they were about to start harvesting. So all the hard work, everything that had happened to make those crops grow, they were now being destroyed by these foxes as they go running through the countryside and burning it down. They come now to what would have been Samson's father-in-law and his wife's house, and they burn it down. They make good on their original threat. And when Samson finds out about this, Samson goes back and he goes off. Well, I do think that there are three things at least that we can take away from today's story and kind of apply it to our lives. And the very first thing is Samson, I believe, never, at least at this point in his life, and really until he is captured after Delilah has shaved his head, Samson never took his Nazirite vow seriously. He never took that relationship with God seriously. He never really considered what might be the best step, the best opportunity, the best way to handle a situation. He was always read and react. He was always fly off the handle. And the thing is, God was going to use Samson to break the Israelites out of the Philistines' bond. But God could have done that in a way that would have been productive to Samson's life, where it wasn't as harmful as it became. But the thing is, Samson never sought God's guidance. Samson could have been an incredible leader with a long life, but yet he never took that relationship seriously. He wasn't really truly seeking what was best, because there probably was an Israelite woman that would have made a great wife for Samson, but he didn't care. All he cared about was he saw this girl, he thought, that's the one I want, that's the one I'm going to marry. The second thing that I think we can take away from this story is that neither Samson or the Philistine woman were emotionally ready or mature enough for a serious relationship, much less marriage. Now, the thing about it is, as teenagers, there's a lot of times that we fall into this trap of we think we have to be in a serious relationship, because if we're not in a serious relationship, well then, we're just some sort of outcast or loser. In reality, though, the majority of people that get married are not high school sweethearts. A lot of them even aren't college sweethearts. It's not like they necessarily have went to school together. Now, that does happen, but it is a fairly rare thing. And so the advice that I would give to you guys is this, is don't worry about being in a serious relationship when you're in high school. I'm going to tell off on myself for a second. And that is one thing that because of how I grew up, and the things that I was taught in church and at these camps and conventions and different things that I went to growing up, they always talked about you only dated people that you were interested in marriage. So for me, in my mind, whenever I heard that, it was like, well, you only date somebody to get married to that person. And it was almost like you dated that person, or if you dated that person, then you were going to get married. And so for me, there were times where my social abilities, maybe, I don't know if that's really the right way to say, but I think there were some things that I didn't learn because I thought that dating had to be a serious relationship, that there wasn't something below a serious relationship. To have those group dates, go on dates where you can kind of interact with people of the opposite sex and be able to start to get a feel for them, to understand kind of the mindset that they have when it comes to how they view the world. We try to grow and mature ourselves so that we can have emotionally stable relationships that we're ready for in the right time, and that we're looking for the right person at the right time. That it's not a matter of preference, that it's a matter of, hey, this is who God has provided for my life, and they are the best for me. You're probably not going to get that on the first date. Let's be honest. You can go out with somebody one time and it could be a complete disaster. You can go out with somebody one time and it can be the greatest date of your life. But it's one date. A relationship is going to be filled with many dates. It's going to be filled with many ups and many downs. It's going to be filled with a lot of just somewhere in between. The thing is, in a relationship, what you have to do is find that person that is going to be there through all of it and help you through all of it. Because when you find that person, you're going to have found something very valuable. The last thing is, Samson doesn't control his emotions very well. And we see that over and over again throughout this story, and really throughout Samson's life. The thing about it is, as Samson is dealing with all of this hurt in his life, is because of his own decisions, the really poor decisions that he made in the first place. From the very first onset there, he chased after a woman that he probably shouldn't have chased after. But he fell, rather in lust or in love, we can't say, but he was going to marry this girl. And because of the riddle, where he wanted to kind of brag about what he had done as far as killing the lion and then eating the honey from the lion, he was kind of being braggadocious and proud about that. There's a lot of ways to deal with rejection. I'm going to say Samson's way is a pretty poor way, but the best way to handle rejection, to handle hurt, to handle heartache, is to openly, humbly, and heartfeltly go to God in prayer. Say, God, I'm hurting. I really felt like you were leading this person into my life for some great purpose. And I really felt like this was it. As we wrap up this week's look at dating and relationships, I want you to really consider, am I really giving God a true listen? Am I really, truly searching out what His best opportunities are for my life? Whether it's in dating, whether it's about college, whether it's about the things that you're a part of in school, the friends that you're with, whoever and whatever it might be. Am I really open to listening to what God has for me?